أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, very happy to be in this community here for the first time. I'm visiting from Dallas, and I really appreciate Brother Imran, Sheikh Radwan, Sheikh Omar's invitation to come here and to see this wonderful, beautiful community that otherwise I would have never met and otherwise I would never would have said salam to. And as I meet you, I want you to envision and go back in time a little bit and imagine that the Prophet ﷺ, he's migrated to Medina. And the Quraysh, the Mushrikun, they are kind of upset about this, about the Prophet ﷺ going to Medina, forming a new nation there. And there are skirmishes that are starting between the Muslimun and the Mushrikun. I want you to think what that may have been like for this new community. Those Muhajirun, they're migrants to a new land, yet these new skirmishes are starting already. And that led to the Battle of Badr. And as you know, the Muslimun in the Battle of Badr, they were very small in number, maybe 1/3, about 313. And the Mushrikun were 1,000, 3 times as much. And enlistment was open for the army. And people were enlisting, as young as 11, 12, 13, 14. They were coming to the Prophet ﷺ and saying, we want to enlist in the army. But the Prophet ﷺ did not allow these souls to be put in danger. he had a certain standard. He said, if you're 15 years of age, then you can be part of the army. And you can imagine 15 years of age in our time, it's a little bit different. They're not playing the video games. They're not always, looking at their screens, for example. They are already men. They're already providing for their family. They have already started their journey in life. But imagine now, there's a young boy who goes to the Prophet ﷺ. He's probably around 11 or 12 years old. He goes with his mother to the Prophet ﷺ and says, I want to enlist in the army. I am ready. I'm a man. I want to protect you, O Rasulullah ﷺ. I want to protect the Muslimun. I want to protect this new nation. The Prophet ﷺ turns him away. Because to protect him. The boy is sad. He is now walking back with his mother back home, crying. He was very enthusiastic, very ambitious. He wanted to do this. He wanted to serve the Prophet ﷺ, but he did not get a chance to in that way. So his mother, at this time, gives him a different option. She says, why don't you serve the Prophet ﷺ in a different way? Why don't you serve the Prophet ﷺ through seeking knowledge and help him in that fashion? She is diverting his attention, she's diverting his energies, his ambition into something different. She's not going back and knocking on the door that's already closed. This is a wise mother. And then this boy, he starts to memorize Quran. And he memorizes 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 17 surah of the Quran. We don't know how long the surahs were. But back then, if you memorize a surah of the Quran, it's as if you knew the meaning, you understood it, you were acting upon it. They used to say about Umar radiallahu anhu, it was just a saying, not sure if it's 100% true, but it took him 8 years to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah because he was not only learning it, but learning it with its meaning and implementing it. And as he was implementing it, then he was learning more. And like that, this boy, he memorized 17 surah in that quality. Then he tells his mother. His mother hears his recitation and is very impressed. And she says, look, I'm going to take you to our tribal leaders. He was from the Ansar, from the Khazraj. So she took him to the tribal leaders. And the tribal leaders, much to my surprise, they gave time to this mother. And they gave time to the child to listen. The child said he wants to be at the service of the Prophet ﷺ and wants to serve him in the way of, he has learned how to read and write. He has learned 17 surah of the Quran and he wants to serve the Prophet ﷺ in this way. The tribal leaders say, recite for us. And the boy recites, and they love his recitation. So they're very excited. Now they're going to go to the Prophet ﷺ and say, a kid from our tribe, we want to put him, dedicate him to your cause, O Prophet of Allah. We want you to take him as a secretary, take him as an intern, take him as, under your tutelage. And they make a plan, and then the leaders of the Khazraj, they go with the boy and the mother to the Prophet ﷺ. And much to my surprise, the Prophet ﷺ, although just finishing off the Battle of Badr, just forming a new nation, a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual nation, a lot to worry about. But he still gives time to these tribal leaders and gives time to the mother, gives some time to the boy and says, okay, recite. And the one who received the revelation is astonished and amazed and is pleased by the recitation of this boy. And he says, okay, you're hired. I'll take you in. You can work for me. Alhamdulillah. Imagine if we had a boss like that. We would all want to be in that company. So he gives him his first task. He says to the boy that I want you to go learn the Hebrew language. See, the Prophet ﷺ, he's a very wise and strategic leader. He saw the gaps that were in his ummah. He saw the gaps that were in his office, you can say. And he said he wants to fill that gap with somebody trustworthy by his side that can translate the Hebrew letters that are coming in, that can write back Hebrew letters to the Jewish tribes and otherwise. And the boy comes back, and guess how long? In 2 weeks, he comes back. And he says, I've learned Hebrew, I know how to write it, I know how to read it. I can understand it 100%, inside out. The Prophet ﷺ puts him to work as a scribe of the Prophet ﷺ. Certain time later, the Prophet ﷺ says, I want you to go learn the Syriac language, which is another language of that time that he was receiving letters in and he wanted to give da'wah to those people. So he comes back in 17 days, this boy, And he says, I've learned the Syriac language. I know how to read it, I know how to write it, I understand it, I know it inside out. The Prophet ﷺ puts him to work. He becomes a scribe of the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine, even the wahi that's coming down, he became the katib al-wahi. He's writing down the wahi as it's coming down to the Prophet ﷺ. How did this happen and why did this happen? This happened because the Prophet ﷺ, he invested time in him. A boss who was investing time in somebody who's under him. The mother invested time in him and funneled his energies into a different direction that was more suitable for him at that time. The tribal leader, took this opportunity to funnel him to the Prophet ﷺ. So it took the entire village to make this child into what he was. And that's the purpose. That's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about what are the gaps within our community here at ICN. What are the gaps within the Chicagoland area community? And how can we fulfill those gaps? What are the gaps in our ummah as Muslim Americans? What is the gap in the ummah as a whole, and what can we do about it? We can't sit by the sidelines for too long. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun ala ra'iyatihi." All of us are shepherds in some way or another, and we're responsible for our flock. Some of us are fathers, some of us are older brothers, some of us are bosses. Some of us, we might have not people, but some things under our responsibility, and we have to take care of those things. So I think it's time that we think about the gaps we have in our community as a whole, and think beyond the structures and think towards solving those problems, inshallah. And we'll talk more about that in the second khutbah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Like I was saying, that this boy, and I'll tell you his name shortly, he became who he was. He became the scribe of the Prophet ﷺ, and actually went on to become something much bigger that I'll describe in detail, because the ummah as a whole, they identified a gap. They needed somebody who could write for the Prophet ﷺ. They needed somebody who knew Hebrew, who knew Syriac, and he went on to do other things as well. And like that, there's many gaps within our community, and we have to identify them. One of the gaps that has been identified about 5 years ago by the Muslim community, we've created a co-op. A co-op where Muslim community takes care of one problem, the student debt crisis. How many of us are students here? Maybe many of us. How many of us have student debt here, or know somebody who has student debt? Perhaps a lot of us who have studied here in America know the crisis, the student debt crisis. I'm going to give you some stats on the student debt crisis. Try to pay attention. Just in the last 10 years, the student debt or student tuition, college tuition, has increased tenfold in the last 10 years. If milk was to increase by that price, it would be $14 to $15 now. There's 44 million Americans out of 300 million Americans, 44 million that owe $1.5 trillion as collective student debt. An average graduate in 2018 graduates with a $40,000 debt, undergrad. A graduate school and professional school is beyond that. They owe a lot more money, and the system is against them. Every 20 seconds, a student goes into default. What does that mean? That means they can't pay their loan for more than 90 days. They can't make the minimum payment on their loan, or they choose not to make it, whatever the case may be. They go into default, which leads them, these young graduates, which leads them, trouble, for example, in leasing a car, in renting a property, in getting a job when their credit is checked because they're delinquent. And this is a form of financial slavery in our time and day. The student debt crisis, one of the biggest debt crises in our time. And it's led to mental health issues among students. It's led to, within the Muslim community, even mental health issues and even suicide among students that can't handle this type of debt. And it's not their fault. At the age of 18 or 20, we're asking them to sign papers and get these student loans. They don't know the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loan. There's a story here that a sister took an unsubsidized loan, not knowing that the unsubsidized loan interest starts right away. And I'll share a few stories for you to illustrate the student debt crisis, as many as I can, within the short time that we have. So a sister from Washington, D.C. writes that she has a $260,000 debt. She says that it dictates her life, her decisions about job, her decisions about children and getting married, buying a house, and to save for retirement. It dictates her mental health also. That's what she writes. Somebody else from Los Angeles has $100,000 of student debt. She says she's an immigrant, like many of us. When I first came to the U.S., people told me all I needed to succeed in America was education. Loan repayment was too far for people to think about. So 7 years later, after I went to my undergrad and got my JD, I realized that a huge part of my income is actually going towards this debt, and I cannot change my lifestyle. I cannot provide for my family in the manner that I want to. From St. Paul, Minnesota, a student writes, I have $102,000 worth of debt. Their parents were well-to-do, so she writes, due to my parents' income, I barely qualified for federal aid and was forced to resort to taking out private student loans because didn't qualify for much grants. Those private student loans have a substantially higher interest rate, and because of that, even though she's been working for 6 years after graduation, still owes over $100,000. Hasn't made a dent in the repayment. From Louisville, North Carolina, and many stories like this, but I'll end with this one. $193,000 in student debt, went to veterinary school, graduated, has been working for the past 9 years, but hasn't made a dent into his debt because so far he's only paid about $18,000 of the principal. The rest went towards interest. In Seattle, $160,000 debt, and says, I graduated from undergrad with no loans thanks to my parents and scholarships, alhamdulillah. Then I went for law school while having a great paying job. I was making payments towards my loan, but most of it was going towards interest. And I have my house to pay for, and that has an interest rate on it as well, but the student rate is higher than the house rate. 5 to 8% is the general student loan rate. I just want to illustrate for this community and for other communities to understand that this is a real problem that 44 million Americans, many of them Muslim, are going through. So this is a gap that was identified by our community. And about 5 years ago, there was a cooperative that was started to fulfill this gap. The Muslim community got together, they raised some funds, they put it in a pool. The students borrow money from this pool, interest-free, not even an application fee. They borrow money from this pool, they go to school, and then they pay it forward, meaning they pay back their loan. And then they're giving donation to this co-op. So the next student can now come and get a loan because the first student has paid it. So alhamdulillah, this co-op now has been productive. It's small, but it's been able to solve the loan situation for about 120 students in 10 different states, alhamdulillah, including many of them in the state of Illinois. And that organization is called A Continuous Charity. You can learn more about the organization outside. You can Google it, A Continuous Charity, interest-free student loans. We want to tell you guys about this service so you don't have to go through these same very stories that we were reading. And perhaps you can become part of the solution. Part of this solution, this gap that exists in the Ummah, get involved in the co-op, the A Continuous Charity, or find your own niche. What are problems within your household, within your masjid, within your community, and don't sit idle. And we have to solve these problems as the Prophet ﷺ was a very strategic leader, and he solved these problems with this boy. His name was Zayd ibn Thabit. The boy we were talking about earlier, his name was Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. Google him, look him up inshallah. After the most tragic situation that happened to the Muslims, the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Zayd ibn Thabit is now a teacher of Quran. And now directly after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, there's Ridda wars that break out. People are leaving Islam or they're refusing to pay zakah, so on and so forth. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, as the next Khalifa, trying to keep the Ummah together, is fighting these factions. And he sends, at that time, Hufaz to fight. Your rank in the army was how much you memorized the Quran. So he sends many Hufaz to fight. And one battle alone, 70 Hufaz died in a matter of minutes. And after this took place, Umar radiallahu anhu, another strategic leader, comes and he sees a gap. He sees that we have the Quran in the minds of men and written in different places, but we don't have it in one book. So he says to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, I'm advising you, Khalifa, our Khalifa, I'm advising you to put the Quran together in one master copy, so to speak, in one mushaf. Abu Bakr says, no way. I'm not going to do something the Prophet ﷺ didn't do. But over time, Umar radiallahu anhu kept on convincing him, and the Huffaz kept on getting shaheed in these battles, where Abu Bakr said, you're right. And together, they could only think of one name and only one name to take on this project, and that was Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, the boy we talked about in the beginning of the story. Why? Why that boy? Because, of course, Allah chose him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran, He will protect it. But why else? Because, like I told you, the mother invested time in the boy. The tribesmen invested time in the boy. The Prophet ﷺ invested time in the boy. And it's about investing the time in our youth, investing the time in the problems that we see to fix them and the gaps that we see to fulfill them, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to do that. Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu then had his own criteria upon which he would collect the Quran. He collected the Quran in one master copy after a while. He said this task was, if they had asked me to carry a mountain, that would have been easier than this task, because this task you can't have any mistakes. After Zayd ibn Thabit produces this one master copy, and after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu passes away, and Umar radiallahu anhu takes over the Khilafah, what happens? What happens? The Islam spreads far and wide. And what happens with that? Different cultures, different languages. And with that came another issue. People are pronouncing the Quran in a different way. People are maybe adding different words to it. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, okay, huge problem. He identified the gap immediately. He called upon who? Again, from retirement, he calls out Zayd ibn Thabit, this guy who is trained now by the Prophet ﷺ, and says, you produce 6 more copies and train 6 teachers. And with that, Umar radiallahu anhu sent them out into the 6 different provinces of the Muslim Ummah at that time. So you can imagine, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ad-dalu al-khayri ka-fa'ilihi." The one who basically leads to something good gets the reward for it later. The sadaqah jariyah, right? Zayd ibn Thabit now is getting reward. He put that mushaf together, getting reward for it. Now that mushaf is on our phones. That mushaf is in our homes and in the shelves here in the masjid. And his mother is getting reward, and the tribesmen are getting reward. And you get the idea. If you do something good, you will get the reward of it. And you pass that reward on. So Zayd ibn Thabit was who he was. He became the mufassir of the mufassirun. He became the qari of the qurra. He became a great teacher. He went on to be a great leader. And you can see that that example only happens when we come together as a community and invest in our youth and identify our gaps. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to identify the gaps we have in our community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to be part of the solution. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to be forgiven in this very moment that we sit here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow our families to be forgiven. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to be entered into Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to be united and to do good and be able to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you put me here and I did the best that I could. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأقم الصلاة